We're staging this installation to make people aware of refugee children who are currently incarcerated and how we might pressure the government to release them into the community.
The focus in this campaign is on the children because they are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. But more broadly, of course, our concern is with the whole very cruel and punitive approach that our nation is taking towards in response to this intractable humanitarian disaster. At the beginning of October, there were 603 children in detention on the Australian mainland and Christmas Island. 186 children are currently detained on Nauru. Under the current dispensation, these children have no prospect of resettlement in Australia. They should be closed, those places, and asylum seekers' claims should be assessed within the Australian community. And for starters, all the children and their families should be released from detention and enabled to participate in our community. Australia, shamefully, is the only signatory to the Refugee Convention to have a policy of mandatory detention and indefinite detention for asylum seekers. Look at this installation and wonder, what if this was my child? What if it was my grandchild? What if it was one of my nephews and nieces having to live under this situation? So we hope that hearts will be moved and that action for change can continue. What we're looking for is a compassionate response, just a basic compassionate response.
So many of us here today feel a deep sense of shame about the fact that so many children and young people have been held in detention. I really encourage you to speak to others, talk to your politicians, do everything you can to make it known that reasonable Australians aren't going to tolerate this anymore.
I spent almost a year in detention centre.
Whole day and the whole night, I was laying down on my bed. I was looking on the ceiling, and I was thinking, like, for how long? For how long do I have to be in this room? I wasn't able to eat. I wasn't able to sleep properly. And now let me tell you, the Australian government locked up those kids in detention centre. And they think we lock these kids in detention centre because people cannot come to Australia. People won't stop. It doesn't even make sense, I believe. It won't stop. If you lock up children in detention centre, it won't stop the boat. That's all I can say, and that's all I can share you with you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming in.
Half of the world's refugee population are children. So we can translate that into the number of children who around this world don't have any safety or security whatsoever, and indeed will become, I think, not just will become a lost generation. We need to do something now so that there's not generation after generation of young people growing up with no hope for the future. Our politicians wring their hands and cry, weep tears about people drowning at sea, and then they can take the ones who survive and put them into hellholes like Nauru and Manus Island and places on the mainland too. Our leaders have deliberately set out to convince people that the folk who are seeking protection here, and there's a small number of them, relatively there are a small number of them, but they are to be feared. No decent country locks up children. A 4-year-old who's virtually confined to his own room because his parents can't bring themselves to come out of the room except to get food and then to go back into that room, 3 by 3, a room that's 3 metres by 3 metres. That's the fate for a 4-year-old kid, and he's virtually not been out of that room for 4 months. I took that family out recently, and during the day, visibly, both the parents and that child changed during the day. so that by the end of the day they were looking reasonably normal and the child was picking up shells from the beach. We're not talking about something that happens on the other side of the world. We're not talking about something that's in Africa or one of the poor countries of the world. We're talking about, as well, here in Melbourne. We must not let this happen. On the steps here of St Paul's, with the message out the front saying we welcome refugees, I point that out to every group of refugees I'm ever with, and they get surprised that something is up and heartened that something is up visibly to say you are welcome. Because they know that there are a lot of good people, but they also feel the implacable weight of a government that's just seems determined not to give them any rights. Not everyone treats refugee children this way. A quarter of Lebanon's population is now made up of Syrian refugees, and the Lebanese government made a decision that they would not start school at the beginning of last school year until they could actually get into school, both the refugee kids and their own kids. Fancy that happening. And wouldn't it be great if something like that could happen in Australia? Thank you.
We launched our organisation here at St Paul's on the 6th of September and expressed our outrage at the terrible damage being done to children and unaccompanied minors in what are effectively Australian concentration camps. Now our distress and outrage are turning into anger. Anger at the well-documented physical and mental suffering of children is of politicians of both major parties who support locking up children. Where do these politicians get their inhuman ideas from? What mad dogs are they listening to? These politicians are destroyers. They are destroying the lives of children and their families. They are destroying Australia's international reputation as a fair and humane and generous society. They are destroying the traditional values of Australian society. We grandmothers are angry. We will remain angry until the hundreds of imprisoned children can live and play freely in our country. We demand that asylum seeker children, their families and unaccompanied minors be released into the Australian community now. Children, free the children.
Over the course of 4 days, members of Grandmothers Against Detention of Refugee Children ran the installation. Many hundreds of people responded, and their Free the Children messages were sent to members of Parliament. Our message was spread more widely through the sale of postcards and badges. Go to this website to play a part in freeing the children.